Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 56 of The Lunch Bunch. It's a very special day today. It's Remembrance Day in Canada and in the Commonwealth, and it's Veterans Day in the United States. So I hope everyone has a pleasant day, but take time to remember the sacrifices that were made so we can be here and do this. So today we're going to be talking about memory. I thought that was kind of apropos. And we're going to be talking about how the internet affects how we remember things, in particular short-term memory. And in researching this, I came across some really interesting papers and posts about the actual physical changes that happen when we read on the internet, as well as just the habits that we have. So before we start, the Lunch Bunch show, we have 15 minutes of main topic, and then we go to the lunchbox where our lunch table guests share what they've come across during the week that they thought was interesting, and then we finish off with the doggy bag, which is tips and links we share with you to take away with you and make your week just A-okay. So let's go. I'm going to start by introducing who we have around the table today, and we have a familiar face and a guest today. So we'll start with BL. BL, how are you doing?
Oh boy, I'm doing well, and I'm thrilled to be here. And,
we're thrilled to have you. It's so nice to see you.
I'm right now getting creamed on Twitter because I have a post in Ad Age today that says that Hangout detractors will eat their hats in 2015, and I am being decimated. I need you guys to help me.
Oh, cool. I'll check that out. My God. How you doing, Randy?
I'm doing well, and thanks to all the veterans past and currently serving for everything that you've done for us.
Scotty, good to see you.
And glad to be here. Very glad to be here, Ray. Thanks for having me.
So yeah, well, I can't wait to be able to check my Twitter stream after the show. So yes, the conversation today, and in the research, and I'm just going to go here and read a couple notes. But there was an article by Carolyn Gregoire in the Huffington Post, and it was I think it was how technology is warping your memory, and she listed 5 ways it does that, how it affects our memory. And I'm going to sort of hit each one, and then we can discuss each point and whether you agree or add some insights to that. And the first point she made is information overload makes it harder to retain information. And she says memory needs time to sink in and transfer information from working memory, the scratch pad of the consciousness, to long-term memory, which is the mind's filing cabinet. So, what do you think of that?
Well, may I say something?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Randy.
I was going to say, what's the subject matter we're talking about today?
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding.
It's a long program. Or a very short one of the two.
Go ahead, BL. Go ahead. I was just being a smartass.
Oh, really surprised.
Okay. What I wanted to say was that I completely agree with that, but I also have a friend who's 92 years old and who has a memory that is really sharp, does not use the internet except once in a while with help, and she said the other day, I can't remember what happened 5 minutes ago, but I clearly remember what happened 60 years ago. So some of what is said about how our brains are fractured and blah, 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 is normal way that our brains work, but I do believe the research that says that multitasking does not make you more efficient. I think that it becomes really important to learn how, and this is the hardest thing for me in the world, to learn how to concentrate for 20 minutes at a time on one thing, and not, I have to look at Twitter, I have to do this, I have to do that. I mean, we are fractured, but, you know, is it hurting our brain? It's just changing it. I don't know if that's hurting.
Well, that's interesting, but changing it in what way? Your 90-year-old friend, you said, has an amazing memory. And long-term memory, I mean, I have a great long-term memory, but my short-term memory, I think I'm noticing that it sucks, you know, like and it's getting suckier. I don't know if it's because I read most of my stuff on the internet, but I do know that when I do read things digitally, whether it's on a Kindle or my iPad, whatever, I don't retain it as well as when I read a book. And I think there's a tactile difference there. And I'll go back to some research later about that and how your brain sees text, letters, fonts, as opposed to how it sees things on the internet.
Do you remember what you see on TV?
Yes, yes, I do.
Is that different? I
think it is. I think I think it is because that's a visual. That's That's a
I
visual
think
thing. We're not talking about text now, right? So we're talking like, well, like movies or proximity to reality. So I think that's a different thing
Well,
altogether.
the only reason I asked is that reading off a screen as opposed, is that the same as reading text, or should we be comparing it to looking at news on television? Or, I'm only asking questions. I don't have answers.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think I
Well,
think there's something to recognize, right? We all, depending on our DNA and our genes and our upbringing, we're all going to lose some of our memory and things like that through natural aging. So let's not confuse that with the shift that's occurred. I agree with what VL said, that and she said she doesn't know. I don't know either, but I can tell you this, that in my upbringing, and I guess really across this panel, in our upbringing, we didn't have computers sitting on our school desks, right? We learned that if we had to do something, go find a book or something like that, we first had to research how to find the book and the subject matter. Nowadays, you don't have to do that, and that's either good or bad. I don't know, but there's a step missing that we had to program ourselves and teach ourselves how to do things, whereas now a machine can do it for us. So just simply ask a question. So is that good? Is that leaving space inside of this brain, this gray matter up here, to put more stuff in? I don't know. I do recognize and agree with Ray, and this might have something to do with my age. I'm in my late 50s. My short-term memory, I seem to notice things a lot. Now, I don't know that it's any different than it was when I was in my 30s. Maybe it's because I am consuming so much more data today, and I'll think about something, and then I'll pile a bunch of more stuff on it, and then I can't think of that one little simple task I was going to do, and that's hindering it. So I think there's some science there, but I would go back to say that, again, is the technology in allowing us to gain more, or is it taking something away from our learning skill sets?
okay. Can I just address something, because I think what you say is very true, and I think when you said consume more, I don't know, maybe it is, maybe we aren't consuming, we're seeing more things are crossing our eyeballs, but actually are we consuming it?
Well, this is one, just to clarify, this is one thing to think about. Okay, to put yourself back in high school or grammar school, and you had those.
Wait, I have to really work on that.
Yeah. I mean, that's you're going way back, right? But you had those that were excelled at every subject matter, right? And those people might have gone on to become a lawyer, might have become an engineer, might have become, whatever. And then you had the average people in there that they struggled, and then you had the below average people that struggled. Not everybody sees this digital space as it's just gonna enlighten them. The same learning skills are present with everybody. You still have that spectrum of intelligence sitting there. Now those that have the engineering mindset can take that and work inside of a digital space and understand how to build programs and things like that. Others still understand the craft of the relationship. So there's still, I mean, that's what I want to include. Just because we have these digital things, it's just bringing the data to us. How we assimilate that data might be different for me than it is for you, right?
I have taught at a university level, and what astounded me was that kids got to college without knowing how to do basic research. And I completely agree with what you just said, Randy, because yeah, bringing knowledge and knowing what to do with it are two different things. And so, is this interfering with the way kids learn? Not from what I can see. From what I can see, kids have learned, if nothing else, they do know how to do research. What they don't know how to do, and what I worry about the most, is they don't know how to vet the information that they have. So they don't know that you better find 3 sources to corroborate. Is that the right word, corroborate? See, I can't remember. But to vet that you have the right information. And if you don't do that, well, it's very well possible that you have something that Snopes said was false. So the missing link to me is, that checking on your information, not just finding it. So that's an education issue that I think is a big one.
Well, remember the old days, okay, when you had to learn by rote, when you were forced to learn, verses of the Ancient Mariner, And I used to think, what reason in God's earth do we have to know the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner? And I think, we always had tons of information available to us, but the difference is that we would have to go to a library or to get it. But I think the idea is that we haven't changed how we learn things. If you really want to learn something, you have to practice it. So you read directions, and then you have to do it yourself. There has to be a transference from the page to real life, and then it sinks in. But we don't do that as much now, I don't think. I'm just bringing up, before you go, Scott, I just want to bring up a comment from Terry Lee Britton, because he says, I would like to see scientific evidence that information overload is affecting memory. I have experienced no difference, and yes, BL, multitasking does not actually exist, simply more stops and starts. That's very true. Terry, I'm going to find something for you here. One sec. It's... let me just get rid of this. It's from Zoldi S. Tang, director of the Memory Disorders Clinic at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. When we're not paying good attention, the memories we form aren't very robust, and we have a problem retrieving that information later. So there's some scientific research there. Scotty, did you have something to say?
Well, I was kind of keying off of, I mean, this is just such a rich conversation we're having. One of the things keying off, we don't change how we learn. And I was thinking, if you take the 20,000-foot view, at one time we had an oral tradition where you had to have long-term memory, and somehow there was an association of how do you get from short-term to long-term, and it was, the brain was wired together in a particular way because that was the only way things could be transmitted generation to generation. And the printing press came along, and writing and so forth, and it was devastating to the oral tradition, and I'm sure that the people around at the time might have thought that the world was going to hell in a handbasket, and I can't help but believe that we're in another one of those periods of time when we're going from the written, traditional written model that we all grew up with to something that's new, a digital model. And all of us have to speak it with an accent because it's not our first language. And yet it might be that we don't have enough young people who have grown up with the current technology that they have learned how to incorporate it in just as effectively going forward as we have in terms of the written language.
Well, I don't want to say, kids today or anything like that.
Oh, go ahead, BL.
But what I notice is that kids know what's happening now. They don't really follow what's come before. So therefore you see things like when it comes to design, they really just don't know the history of design or how typography used to be used or what kerning was or what used to make things beautiful now that we don't have those options. So to me, an educated person is one who doesn't just know what's happening now, but who knows what came before. And that doesn't seem to be a concern anymore.
That's a key point that and I share that with BL. I might think of it a little differently, but and that has to do with what we have before us. We can get instant answers now, whereas we used to couldn't get instant answers. We get instant news. We get live time reporting from the front lines of the war that's going on. So nowadays, if you think of, and I don't know that kids, but the millennial, the youth, maybe that they grew up with that instantaneous knowing that, and I hear time after time certain steps of our history, global history, is not taught as it was 40 years ago or 50 years ago. And that has something to do with, maybe it is taught, but it's not viewed as important to understand those stepping stones. Understanding what Scott just said about the printing press. What happened when that came along? What were we doing before that? We used to be that only the scholars had all the knowledge, and we were all ignorant, right? We depended on them to tell. Now we're all scholars, or have the potential to be scholars.
Yes, Scott.
Well, this is in thinking about the program, this is precisely another of the thought processes that that I went through, and that is, it used to be that the culture would look to the past for the answers, and that's why you learned the rhyme of the ancient mariner. That's why you learned long passages, and people were taught Latin, and because all of the answers came from Greece and Rome and Socrates and so forth. And then Thoreau came along, and Emerson and so forth, and then it was, well, we are now garnering the answers not from the past, but the answers are in the future, and they're brought so we step into the future, and we look to the future for making the world better. But now it seems like that's collapsed into the middle, where it's now everything is instantaneous, and it's assisted with big data. So it's a brand new world.
But that was a reasoning, right, Scott? I mean, if you were able to talk about the history or talk about the future, you used your reasoning skill sets to come up with a conclusion within yourself.
Precisely, it was where do I cast my attention to figure out how to be successful as a person, and how does that happen culturally as a society? So in Seattle in 1960 we had the World's Fair, and it was the future, and the future of America was that we're going to have sidewalks, that we're moving sidewalks, and George Jetson flying cars, and those sorts of things. And I'm not sure. Do we still look to the future to think that we're finding our answers, and that's where our future resides, or is it that we're more thinking that, hey, it's right now? I mean, it's not the far future. It's the latest app that is being released, or the latest iPhone.
Well, we've got those moving sidewalks, and Rosie the robot is right around the corner. So,
well,
that brings me. I want just to a couple of things that you said, Scotty. First of all, the ancient Greek, and everything old is new again. I mean, it was in ancient Greece when they're having symposiums and teaching. It was seen as extremely vulgar to take notes. You're expected to remember things. But I want to throw this out at you before we wrap up this part of the show is do you think we're suffering from this sort of iTunesification of data, of information? You know how iTunes, remember when CDs came out, for instance? We're used to learning things linearly, one page at a time, one track on an album, on a whole album, and there was a reason why the tracks were laid out they were. So you listen to it, cut by cut by cut. And now when iTunes came around, everything was shuffled. Just like a big, just throw it up in the air, and we're going to get little pieces of information without the context. And that's what I want to ask about, is that when you're saying, do we always look to the future, I think we have to look at both. To put everything in context, we have to have a big picture of things. And I think that's one of the problems with reading digitally, is that we don't have the context. When you're reading a book, there's the geographical context. You know where you're on the page. You know that there's 2 pages there. You know that there's a corner. There's a physicality about it. On a digital like an iPad or whatever else, there really isn't. It's word by word by word, sort of like that iTunes thing, where it's just the song by song, but without the whole album to put it in context.
So, have you noticed recently that there's a big change in the way, in fact, your new website, the way that websites are being done, where you are expected to scroll the page to get the information as opposed to clicking into the contents? The assumption is being made now that people will scroll. I wonder, I'll be interested in the results of that change, because the, TLDR, too long didn't read, is what a lot of people say, because so many of us have, including me, have the attention span of a flea. So I think that there's an effort being made to get people to read more online, or something is changing. The cheese moved, and I'm curious to see the result of that.
That's interesting. We had that discussion, Randy, in the green room about, so what? We're talking about memory. What can we do, either as content creators or consumers, to make it easier? As creators, we can help block a page so that it's easier to read. But we're talking about hyperlinks. And do we put hyperlinks in the middle of a paragraph like we're used to doing, right, all the time? But even having a hyperlink, first of all, stops you, because you have to think, oh, should I click it or not? So that's kind of blocks the flow. And if you do click it, there's chances that you may be taken to a whole different page and then go down a rabbit hole. So so that's kind of goes on what you're saying, BL, is that the habit of scrolling before. I remember people thinking, no, you don't want people to scroll. Everything had to be top, on top. And but now it's very common to scroll, and you have a better chance of people staying on your page as opposed to linking to somewhere else.
I'd be curious to see the stats on.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
Anybody want to add anything before we move on?
Well, I could, but it would be a five-minute conversation. So
that's fine. It's kind of a holiday today. Go ahead.
We can also say we're not going back, though, right?
We're not going back?
They're not going back. I mean, what's about is the future, and that's the way it's going to be, and it's just going to be more and more.
So how do we do it? I mean, how do we deal with it? I think that's the question.
Go ahead, Scotty. I'm sorry.
Study where millennials actually have a worse short-term memory than people over 55. For the rate that they forget their car keys, or stuff like that. Well, and they're saying, well, correlation obviously would be the fact that they're on the internet all the time and they multitask all the time.
So what I was going to say is that content is now being provided by Google Search, and context will be Google Glass and Google Contacts, and eventually a brain implant where the context will be served up in real time. That was a little bit of a throwaway comment. Every joke has a little bit of truth to it, right?
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to go to a whole different tangent there. So lunchbox time. What happened this week? What do you want to bring up?
May I?
Oh, yes, by all means.
I brought a book apropos. I don't know if you all can read it, but this is called Net Smart: How to Thrive Online by Howard Rheingold, who is a long-term friend and mentor and absolute genius about the internet. Predicted in the early 90s everything that was going to happen. And in this book, he's talking about infotension, which is how you determine what deserves your attention and how you keep from fracturing it. I can't recommend a book more highly than this one, apropos this conversation, but just in general, because it is just all of the points that we're covering, it covers them in extreme intelligent detail that I think you'll all love.
Oh, thanks. So you'll put the link in the comments?
I will.
Great, thanks very much. Randy.
This is not something for the week. This is something for the month of that we're in. Back in 2003, a couple of guys sitting in a bar, go figure that, came up with an idea. One of them's friend was celebrating or trying to bring attention to breast cancer, so they felt a little need to highlight men's health. So they came up with an idea to have a mustache growing contest, and it grew into November month. And in 2003, there was initially 30 guys down in Melbourne, Australia, and that by the time 2004 rolled around, there was so much momentum behind it, they set it out into what it is today. So it was focused on prostate cancer, but it's about men's health. So if you see some guys that has got a big brushy mustache or coming out or trying to grow one this time of year, pat him on the back and say thanks. I recognize that. Or if you want to contribute, that's a good way to do it. And I'll put a link to the Movember website on there.
Thank you, Randy. It's huge now, and in Canada, I think mental health is a big issue here. Men's mental health, and so I'm supporting Friends this year. For the last few years, I did it, but I thought I'd save you from that site.
Men have a extremely low short-term memory, so the first thing they forget is to go check their health with their doctor. So, as a reminder.
Thank you, Scotty.
Well, and that's why that's why all men should get married, because it's a proven fact that married men, wives, do more for married men's health than anything else. But that's off topic. Going from
okay, well, put that one down for a future show, Scott.
Going from something that is valuable and important, such as preceded me, I find the lunchbox the most difficult part of the entire show, and I just racked my brains, and I gave up. I decided that I thought, what is the most exciting, fun thing that I have run across on the internet in a long time, and it's these guys. It's called Two Cellos, Thunderstruck. It's had 27 million views, so you might have seen it. But for anyone who hasn't seen it, all they do is just play a cello for 4 minutes and 58 seconds. But it is exciting 4 minutes and 58 seconds you'll ever see. So I'm just being frivolous today and sending off something that's
I saw that link that you had shared, Scott, and I was wondering, okay, what's the context for this? Okay, yeah, okay, I'm familiar with them, and yeah, they're like really hot, but so what's and I thought, okay, well, maybe he's going to go with a repurposing content thing. Maybe, because it's very Baroque, and they're in a little Baroque kind of theater. I'm thinking, okay, this is interesting. Sort of a mashup between history and with rock, basically. So okay, so I stretched. I tried to make it fit.
and I did it perfectly by just saying I'm copping out. Here you go, have fun.
Oh wow, Vivek, did you bring anything today? Okay.
Unfortunately, no, I have had a hectic day because sadly this is a bit of sad news. But my cousin, she lost her father this morning.
Oh, condolences. Sorry.
It's been a hectic day, sorts of.
Okay, well, just
anyway.
I won't put the light on you anymore. Okay, so anybody leave any tips? I'll start with one, only because we're talking about memory, and my short term, as I said before, is really fading. And that is, and I mentioned this before, but I really count on Web Clipper, the Evernote Web Clipper app. I used to use, there's a couple of things, tricks I do for Google Plus posts that I want to keep around, because for me, if I bookmark something, it's gone. I'll never remember to get to it, or I forget what folder I put it in. So what I've done, I did the circle thing. I created just a circle with me in it, and I'll share things to that circle so I can go back. The other thing I've done is created a community, a private community, with just myself and my other self, Nuraycom, and I'll share things to that, and that's kind of cool, because then you can categorize it, whether it's social media or Google Plus or content marketing or whatever else, and then you can go back and you go through those categories and find the article. But now I have to say probably 80% of my bookmarking, keeping things, is my Evernote, and I really depend on that heavily. So I highly recommend, if you do have Evernote, to use the extension, the Clipper.
I picked up a handy little piece in branding that focuses on, as a brand, you should focus on cause and not effect. Cause believes that when you take into account the beliefs and shortcuts, impulses within the mind of the consumer, you can create change. Effect believes that if you communicate enough with a customer, you can create change. The cause, it gets a different buy-in, but I'll share an article that lays that out in simplistic terms and gives a good reasoning behind it.
Cool. Thank you very much, Randy. So is that it for tips?
I have one.
Cool.
I also have a hard time. I use a circle in Google Plus that I just call bookmarks, and the good part is that it's searchable if you remember that you had it. But
that's the trick.
Yeah, but I use Digo, and the reason I use Digo is that you can put tags on your content, and you can put it in folders, and you can make it public or private, but then you can search your library on your tags. So that's the one that works for me, and I have to say I've never been able to figure out how to use Evernote effectively, but this one I can, so it's simple.
Oh, cool. Is it a web-based?
Yeah, digo.com.
Okay, cool. Check that out.
And it also lets you, which I like a lot, you're able to highlight portions of an article, and so that will come up in the box that comes up when that reference comes back, so you see right away why you saved it, which is what
Has anyone tried the new Google bookmark, the Chrome bookmark thing? There's a new. It looks different, right? Has anyone checked it out?
I started to use it, but I don't have. I can't. I have things in too many places already.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's yeah. I understand that for sure. It's prettier, but I'm finding it a bit hard to get used to.
Right,
Cool.
Raymond. Before you go, I just want to say something that one of the listeners out there, Deborah, says something that I identify with totally, and she said that she remembers everything she sees and consumes. The problem she has is she just doesn't remember where she filed it in that brain. So I think that's my issue. I just can't ever find that right file drawer or something. So.
That's the trick, right? It's once it goes into the file
Don't you
cabinet.
wonder what happens today to people with a photographic memory? Like, what is? Oh my God! I can't imagine what their brain must be like.
Well, thanks everybody. We're actually past the 45-minute mark. Anyway, this was fun. This is very interesting, and it's certainly a topic we can really dig into a lot more if we remember to go back to it. So, thanks again, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you next week, Tuesday, 12:15. Take care. Bye bye.